Dinesh D'Souza focuses much of his attention on the president's half-brother, George Obama, who, at the time of my writing this, lives in an area of Nairobi, Kenya, called Huruma. An interview with George is prominently featured in D'Souza's movie 2016, Obama's America. According to D'Souza, George is particularly interesting because he lives in rubble on a few dollars a day, while his powerful multimillionaire brother doesn't lift a finger to help him. Well, D'Souza is right that George Obama lives in the slum, while his half-brother lives very well indeed. But the impression that D'Souza wishes to give of a young man on the edge of survival cast aside by his resentful relative in the White House is, as with so many things D'Souza, wrong, wrong, wrong. In fact, in Homeland, the book that George Obama co-wrote with Damien Lewis, George writes a good deal about the incorrect impression people have of him because of certain media reports. In talking about an interview he gave, his first, with a European journalist, George says that the journalist had, quote, made it sound as if I were ashamed to live there and resentful of my American brother's success. I'd told the journalist the opposite. I'd said that I was happy living in Huruma and proud of my brother's achievements and his dreams. George goes on to talk about having his faith in the media destroyed by this piece, and that other reporters came pursuing the same angle, to discredit my American brother by comparing the differences between our two lives. I refused to speak to them. Well, George, somehow you let Dinesh D'Souza slip under the wire. In fact, the real George Obama is much more interesting than the simplistic picture D'Souza draws of him. The father that he and the president share died when he was a baby. His mother remarried a man of some wealth who seemed to be a wonderful stepfather right up until the time that he abandoned his family. The loss devastates George. He becomes violent, is thrown out of school, and becomes a teenage gangster. After spending the better part of a year in a filthy, violent prison waiting for a trial, he is ready to turn his life around. Apparently he does, co-founding a community organization, the Huruma Centre Youth Group, to help young people in the slums of Nairobi. None of this comes out in D'Souza's interview. Here's George Obama again, talking about the early media reports. One aims for the White House, the other lives in an African slum. That was the tone of the headline. It was true to say that I lived in a poor African slum while my brother was running for the White House, but it wasn't true to say that I resented that fact, or felt that my brother should have done something about my situation. Nothing, George Obama says, is critical of his famous half-brother. Now here's where things get weird. D'Souza tries to make the case that George Obama's life supports D'Souza's GTO, his grand theory of Obama, which is that the president is primarily motivated by his late father's anti-colonialism. Here's D'Souza. From a very young age and through his formative years, Obama learned to see America as a force for global domination and destruction. He came to view America's military as an instrument of neo-colonial occupation. He adopted his father's position that capitalism and free markets are code words for economic plunder. Obama grew to perceive the rich as an oppressive class, a kind of neo-colonial power within America. In his worldview, profits are a measure of how effectively you have ripped off the rest of society, and America's power in the world is a measure of how selfishly it consumes the globe's resources and how ruthlessly it bullies and dominates the rest of the planet. Nothing, George Obama says, however, supports D'Souza's case. George does talk to D'Souza about how colonialism was not all bad, and D'Souza runs with this, claiming that the president does not want to be associated with someone who doesn't damn colonialism at every opportunity. But it's not as though George is a well-known pro-colonialist. Are we to believe that the president rejects his half-brother because of something said during D'Souza's interview? D'Souza also tries to make the case that the president does not like that George was, quote, rescued by a white Westerner, the Frenchman who raised him. But this conveniently ignores the fact that this man suddenly abandoned George and his mother. D'Souza is, once again, wrong. Wrong about the circumstances of George Obama's life, and wrong, weirdly wrong, in thinking that anything George has said or done somehow supports D'Souza's analysis of the president. Well, there's more wrongness to come.